y'all, I'm Elisa and I am the Scrappy Wife behind scrappywife.com, and today I have another art journaling process video for you. I'm working in the Dina Wakley Media Journal. This is the blue edition, and so it is filled with all different kinds of mediums for you to art journal on top of, and I'm going to work on this spread right here, and I will definitely list all the products I end up using down below. Otherwise, I'm just going to turn on some great music, put you guys on fast forward, and let's go. This whole page ends up being kind of an experiment in how these two different papers, the denim versus this really textured kind of watercolor paper, take the different mediums that I put on it. The first thing I am doing is sketching out some mountains actually, and the pencil wasn't really showing up on the denim, so I come back with a micron pen, just knowing that I really wanted to be able to see where those mountains were going to be and that I was going to paint over them anyway, so the lines were not super important. This is some black acrylic paint from Handmade Modern, and it's from their metallic line, so it has a bit of glitter or shimmer to it, I guess I would say. Sorry, some of my hair getting in the way here. And man, did this paper soak up paint. It was crazy. I'm thinking that if I do something like this again in my art journal here, I'll probably gesso the page. I think that that might have helped because both sides just soaked this black paint up like crazy. So I'm gonna jump ahead here so you don't have to watch me paint the whole thing. I'm trying to be a little bit careful around the mountains, but not too careful because I know I'm gonna come back with paint and I'll be able to fix any lines and things later on. But I do want it to be a solid black coverage because my vision was kind of for a night sky was what I was going for, and I wanted it to have a really solid coverage. And now I'm switching over to the denim and quickly discovering this is now the third time that I'm pouring paint out of the little paint pot, and I just like to pour it into the lid to work. I find it pretty easy to do that. For some reason I didn't want to pull out my full palette. Normally I use an actual deviled egg holder that I got from like the dollar store, and I use that as my paint palette to hold different paints, but didn't want to pull it out this time, was feeling lazy, so I'm just working from the top, and you can just see it soaking in over and over and over. I do eventually get good coverage, and I'm happy with how my scene is shaping up. I want to do mountains because the phrase that was on my mind is we can do hard things, and to me nothing sounds harder than maybe climbing a mountain, or thinking of the verse in the Bible that says it takes but faith the size of a mustard seed to move a mountain. So I was just thinking of mountains and doing hard things like we are all kind of doing these days. Now I have my Dina Wakley gloss sprays, and these are her new sprays, and I am still learning how to use them. They are an acrylic spray, so they are not water reactive. They don't have the same properties that my other sprays, like the Distress Oxide sprays, and I had hoped that they would not soak in, that they would kind of rest on top of this black acrylic paint, because I did let it dry, but I really didn't get the kind of look I was going for. I feel like I wanted a more splattered look instead of, you can see here I'm pulling out and actually trying to splatter. I wanted it to look splattered, almost like a galaxy look, but it just soaked in a lot as it dried, and you end up not getting a lot of that color that I was looking for. And then I'm just messing around with some sprays on different parts of the page, but I end up going back and painting that. Now for some stars in my night sky, this is white gesso that is watered down just slightly, but it does hold up really nicely over the black. That has been an awesome solution for me. I've been looking for white paint forever, and someone suggested using white gesso, and it has worked marvelously. So thank you to whoever suggested that. I have been loving my white gesso. You can see that I pulled out my Jane Davenport acrylic paints, and I am using an array of colors to paint the mountains a solid color for the background. And I just used the Jane Davenport ones mostly because of the color selection. I really enjoy her line of colors. This will dry flat as opposed to the shimmer metallic feel that is in that black Handmade Modern line. So it does create a nice contrast on the page, and I'm sticking with the purples and pinks and blues kind of in that color tone. And as I paint, you can actually look in the background, in that black background, and you see the acrylic spray drying, because you don't use a heat gun on acrylic spray because that actually melts the plastic in it. So you can see it drying and just kind of disappearing a little bit. There are hints of color for sure in the background, but it did not stand up to the black like I was hoping it would. I probably should have just done some regular paint splatters for that effect, but that's okay. Part of art journaling is learning lessons and moving on from there. So I'm filling in this purple. That's going to be my biggest mountain, and then I'll come through with one last blue over on the edge. And again, it is eating up a lot of paint, but actually the Jane Davenport is holding up a little bit better. I think it's just a thicker paint in general, so it's not soaking in quite the same as the Handmade Modern line was. And then one last little bit of blue, and I'll have my mountain range, or at least the base of my mountain range, ready to go. You are going to see me try a variety of different techniques to add some texture and interest to my mountains. So the first thing is I'm going to play with this acrylic spray again, and I wanted to add it over there to the blue mountain, hoping again that the blue on top of the blue would kind of make a neat pattern, but it fades in and I end up covering it up with something else. This is some Dina Wakley collage paper, and of course I put it down before the paint was completely dry, but that's not a big deal. I'm going to kind of roughly cut out the shape of the mountain here. Again, not very scientific, I guess you would say. I'm just super roughly cutting out that shape, and then I'm going to come back after I have the rough shape here. I want to cover that mountain with this collage paper, but of course I want the blue to come through, and I think that just the paint underneath with clear gesso on top will do the trick, and it doesn't really work like I think it's going to work. Partly I think because the paint was still wet. So what I'm going to do is actually, I have it covered on top, and then I can't believe I tried this and I can't believe it worked, but I actually pull up the tissue paper and then add gesso underneath so that it will stick really nicely. And you can see once the gesso is underneath, then it really does fade into the paper like I thought it would, and the tissue paper kind of disappears. However, the paint wasn't dry, so you can see my gesso has now turned blue, and so I'm going to just shade that out and have kind of blue sparks coming from the mountain. It will dry and tone down, so I'm not super worried about it, but again, this is just me pushing through an art journal page and not showing a lot of patience, which happens, and I'm not worried about it because I always just end up working around it anyway. I did learn my lesson though, so I put the gesso down first, and I'm trying to use one of the white on white pieces of tissue paper in that Dina Wakley collage paper collection. And I am just not having a lot of success with this particular paper. It doesn't come through as much. It just doesn't end up, the tissue paper part, not the white, but the tissue paper part doesn't fade like I hope it will. And so I did learn a different technique that I'm going to try in another video coming up on how to get that paper to work like I want it to work. But here you can see me just smoothing it out with my finger and really getting it down on the page. I'll trim it off here. I'll trim it closer later on, but I'm just going to let that dry while I go on to work with some of my different mountains, and I'll come back and deal with that one later. This is seemingly a little bit random, but I have my date stamp, and I am filling in my purple mountain with a bunch of dates starting from the last day my kids were in school. And I had this vision of one of the big mountains that I feel like we're all overcoming right now is just the calendar, and the way our calendars have changed, and all these dates that had significance kind of feel like they're just all mushing into each other, I guess I would say. Like so many canceled plans, so many different things. And so to me, the passage of time was kind of symbolized with this mountain full of all of these random dates from the start of the quarantine up until now. I have a stencil pulled out. I mixed some of that acrylic paint that I used for that mountain in with Tim Holtz texture paste, and I'm just using my finger because for me that's what works best, spreading texture paste. And because I mixed the paint in, it's a colored texture paste now, and so I'll get a very neat looking texture on this mountain, very tone on tone, which I always enjoy because I think it adds a nice interest and look to the mountain. I'm going to fill in just the last little bit here so that the full thing has that same texture going on. For my bright pink mountain, I actually add some shimmer spray, and this is the Dilution Shimmer Spray, and it doesn't show up well on the video, but I wanted it to look almost like lava running down, and you do get that impression when you see it in person. It just isn't going to come across on the video. Now I'm making sure that that collage paper is nice and dry, and I'm going to come back over the top of it with these metallic watercolors. And finally, it does tone down the tissue look of the paper, and I'm mixing the blues, purples, pinks, mixing all those colors in, and am really pleased with the result. You get this kind of pastel looking mountain, and it's very different from the dark blue that's underneath, but in the end I'm happy with how it turned out, especially because midway, once I'd put that first collage paper on, I was super unhappy with what it was looking like, so adding the metallic watercolor really helped a lot. I mentioned earlier that I had planned to come back and kind of crisp up the lines around the mountains, and I'm going to do that with this black acrylic paint. I'll put it in fast forward so you don't have to watch me do it the whole time, but I just chose a really thin brush and I'm coming along the edge of the mountains just to provide that black line I was going for, a little bit of a crisper edge. And even though it's the same black as the background, because it's in that bold line, I do think it sets the mountains off from the background even more, if that makes sense. So I don't have the steadiest of hands, so I had a little bit of a rough time, especially on the uneven surface, but that's okay. It's a good practice time, a good technique to work on. So this next part, I think if I had to do it again, might be something I would change up. I wanted to add a white shadow, and now that I think about it, saying the words out loud, white shadow, that doesn't really make sense, but I wanted this white outline again to set my mountains apart even more, and it looks okay. I feel like I liked it better with just the black, so I could even go back and change it again, but I left it there for now. They end up looking a little bit more cartoony than I had intended, so I wanted the lines to end up a little bit messier. So I come back with a black Sharpie, and it looks like I've gone crazy, but I'm trying to add some well-placed scribbles on my mountains, and I even add some scribbles up at the top. I just wanted it to look a little bit messier. They were coming off a little bit too crisp and clean, and I wasn't really liking that look, and I felt like getting a little bit messy. Now I have my sunburst stencil here, and I'm pulling out a gold paint pen, and this is like a handmade modern calligraphy marker. I don't even know if they make it anymore. If they make it at Target, I will list it below, or else I'll link a gold paint pen. And I'm tracing the outline of these sunbursts of this ray that is coming up, and then I'm going to take a ruler and extend out those rays even farther. So here you can see just extending those out even farther so that they're going off the page. And I like the idea of the sun coming up from behind the mountains, even with the night sky. It's just an interesting juxtaposition. And for me, art journaling is just a play on what is going on in your head, and just you can make a fantastical world, and I love that idea. To bring a little more attention to my sun rays here, I have a paint glitter pen, and this is gold glitter in a paint pen. It's a deco paint pen that I actually picked up in Italy, but I know that they sell it in the US too. And I'm filling in those rays with that gold. Sorry for my hair getting in the way right there. It looks like a crazy thing floating in front of the camera. Just filling that in, and now I want to add my title. And you can see a little bit of that acrylic splatter in the background, but not totally. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my actual title. Decided I'm going to add some more scribbles with the gold calligraphy pen, which actually I end up liking a lot. And then over here on the side, I will handwrite in my title, starting with the word hard, and it's all about we can do hard things. And that'll do it for this art journal entry. If you are interested, I've linked all the products down below, and I also have a link to join my bi-weekly newsletter. So I send it out once every couple weeks. It has some crafty tips and organization hacks and just some fun things going on. So check that out if you're interested in signing up. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment below. I would love to hear from you. I hope that you have a fantastic day, and as always, keep it creative.